Mom, why does she look exactly like me? Adeline's breath caught in her throat as her fingers clenched around the worn strap of her purse, knuckles growing pale in the fading light. The laughter of a little girl nearby rang in the air, and Adeline's gaze locked onto her. The girl's white dress fluttered as she twirled, and her features were so eerily familiar. Hazel eyes, a heart-shaped face, the same small birthmark on her wrist. Everything about this child mirrored Adeline's own daughter. Some mirrors, Adeline whispered, her voice trembling, show more than just reflections. And at that moment, she knew, deep down, that the past, long buried, was no longer behind them. It was coming toward them, alive and walking, just beyond the gates of Dreamworld Amusement Park. The gates loomed in the distance, a candy-colored fortress of reds, yellows, and blues, their chipped paint hinting at years of sunshine, laughter, and the passage of time. Beyond the gates, the Ferris wheel creaked as it turned lazily, a soothing sound that harmonized with the distant roar of the roller coaster. Balloons bobbed in the wind, tied to carts selling cotton candy and hot dogs. It was Children's Day at the park, and it buzzed with life, kids running between the rides, parents trailing behind them with smiles tinged with exhaustion. 8-year-old Emma Carter stood just outside the fence, clutching her favorite stuffed bear, Mr. Paws. The old toy, with one button eye hanging by a thread, had seen better days, and Emma's faded yellow dress, a hand-me-down from an older cousin, swung loosely around her thin frame. The wind picked up, sending a chill through the air. Beside her, her mother, Adeline Carter, knelt on a patch of grass overlooking the park entrance. Her fingers sifted through her purse, counting the crumpled bills inside, 5 ones and a few quarters. That was all they had for the day. "Popcorn's all we've got, sweetie," she said gently, her voice tight but warm. "We'll sit here, watch the lights. Best seats in the house, right?" Adeline's dark hair, streaked with gray far too soon, hung loosely around her face, and she pushed it back absent-mindedly with a calloused hand. Once, she had worked as a seamstress, designing dresses, but after losing her job when the factory shut down 2 years ago, she had struggled to make ends meet, taking on odd cleaning jobs, stitching hems, anything to get by. Emma nodded, her hazel eyes sparkling as she gazed at the neon lights flickering across the park. She didn't mind. Or at least, she told herself she didn't. Mr. Paws didn't need roller coasters. He liked the quiet, the stories Adeline told about brave bears and hidden treasures. "We're explorers," Emma whispered to him, hugging him close. But her gaze strayed to the bustling crowd, the laughter of children ringing out sharply. She couldn't help the curiosity that stirred within her, a small itch that refused to be ignored. Slipping quietly away from her mother's side, Emma wandered along the fence, her sneakers scuffing the dirt. The wind tugged at her dress, and a stray thorn caught it, but she hardly noticed. Then, she saw her. The girl stood in the VIP line beside a tall man dressed in a perfectly tailored gray suit. His posture was rigid with authority, and the girl, holding his hand, looked so much like Emma. Same heart-shaped face, same gap in her smile where a front tooth was missing, same hazel eyes that sparkled with mischief. Even the crescent-shaped birthmark on her left wrist matched Emma's exactly. The girl was dressed in a pristine white dress, pressed to perfection, her dark hair tied neatly with a satin ribbon that bounced as she giggled. The man beside her handed over gold-embellished tickets to the attendant at the entrance, his voice low as he spoke. Emma blinked and took a step back, her heart hammering. "Mr. Paws," she whispered, clutching the bear tightly. "She's me. But fancy." Before she could think better of it, Emma darted forward, slipping beneath the distracted guard's arm and weaving through the crowd. Her sneakers slapped against the pavement, her heart racing. She reached the man just as he was about to enter and tugged at the sleeve of his suit. "Mister," she said, her voice small but steady. "Why does she look like me?" The man, Richard Lawson, CEO of Lawson Enterprises, froze mid-step. His phone slipped from his hand, hitting the ground with a sharp crack. He crouched down, his blue eyes wide as they shifted from Emma to the girl beside him, his daughter, Lily. What did you say?" he stammered, his polished demeanor crumbling. Lily bounced excitedly on her toes, clapping her hands. "Daddy, she's my twin. Look, she's got my smile. Can she come play with us?" Richard's face drained of color. His gaze darted between the two girls, his mind racing. Emma stared back at him, her breath catching in her chest, the storm of recognition clouding her thoughts. 8 years ago, Richard and Adeline had been inseparable. They had shared dreams and hopes, creating designs together in their cramped apartment, their love burning brightly. But then, Adeline had seen the tabloid headline Lawson heir engaged to Hammond heiress and had fled, heartbroken, pregnant with Emma. She had raised their daughter alone, stitching together a life without him. Richard, unaware of the pregnancy, had searched for her for months, but his letters had been returned unopened. Devastated, he had married someone else, a woman who later died during childbirth, leaving him a widower and father to a daughter who was haunted by the loss of his past love. "Who is she, Mommy?" Emma asked, clutching Mr. Paws tightly. Adeline's lips parted, but no words came out. Then, Lily tugged at Richard's hand, her voice insistent. "Daddy, please. Can they come in? I want a sister." The tension was cut through by Lily's high-pitched plea, and Richard, still reeling, nodded slowly. "Let's go inside," he said. And just like that, Dreamworld Amusement Park swallowed them up, its bustling energy surrounding them, a whirlwind of sound and color. The scent of sugar and grease filled the air, the ground sticky with spilled soda. Emma and Lily raced toward the carousel, their laughter ringing in the air. Emma's faded yellow dress was a stark contrast to Lily's pristine white, but both girls climbed onto the wooden horses, Emma's chipped and worn, Lily's sparkling white and perfect. As the ride spun to life, Lily chattered about her rock collection. "This one's magic," she said, pulling out a shiny quartz stone from her pocket. Emma whispered to Mr. Paws, "He says you're nice." Lily beamed and offered the stone to Emma, her eyes full of warmth. But while the girls played, Adeline and Richard stood off to the side, their conversation barely audible above the sounds of the park. "You left me," Adeline said, her voice trembling with old hurt. "You left me and Emma." Richard's jaw clenched. That announcement, it wasn't real. He snapped, his fists clenched. "Victoria staged it, some power play. I never chose her, Adeline. I looked for you for years." Adeline's breath caught in her throat, and she struggled to keep her emotions in check. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered, pain lacing her words. Richard's gaze softened as he glanced at Emma. "She's mine, isn't she?" Adeline's eyes filled with tears, the floodgates breaking open. "I thought you didn't want us," she whispered. Before Richard could reply, they both noticed something out of the corner of their eyes movement near the funnel cake stand. A figure in a gray hoodie, snapping photos of the girls with a sleek camera. Adeline's heart sank. "Alex, someone's following us," she whispered, her voice tight with fear. Richard's face hardened as he followed Adeline's gaze toward the figure in the gray hoodie. His hand instinctively moved to his pocket, but he didn't reach for his phone. Instead, he took a deep breath, his jaw clenched. "Stay with the girls," he said firmly, his voice low and protective. "I'll handle this." Adeline's heart raced as she watched him stride toward the hooded figure. The crowded park felt suddenly oppressive, the noise blurring into a dissonant hum. Her fingers tightened around Emma's hand, her gaze never leaving Richard as he cut through the crowd. The man in the hoodie didn't seem to notice Richard's approach until it was too late. As Richard neared, the figure turned abruptly and disappeared into the throngs of park-goers, moving with the fluidity of someone well-practiced at evading detection. Richard quickened his pace, his eyes scanning the crowd, but the man had vanished like a shadow swallowed by the lights. He stopped for a moment, his gaze sweeping over the crowd one last time before he returned to Adeline, his face tight with frustration. "He's gone," he said, voice low and grim. "But I'll find him." Adeline felt a cold shiver creep up her spine. It wasn't the first time something like this had happened. She hadn't told Richard about the notes, the threats, the words written in jagged red ink. Secrets worth millions. "We're watching you." But the fear gnawed at her, unrelenting. Emma tugged at her hand, pulling her attention away from Richard. "Mom, who was that man?" she asked, her voice soft with worry. Adeline forced a smile, kneeling down to her daughter's level. "Just someone who got too close, sweetie. Don't worry about it. We're safe now, okay?" Emma didn't look convinced, but she nodded, her hand reaching for Mr. Paws, clutching him tightly as if seeking comfort. Richard crouched beside Adeline and Emma, his voice softer now. We should get out of here. Take you both somewhere safe, he said. I don't know who's behind this, but I'm not taking any chances with you or Emma. Adeline's heart ached with a mix of relief and something darker, something she couldn't quite name. The years apart had been long, and the world they now found themselves in was nothing like it had been when they were together. But something was still pulling them together, even with all the distance and the hurt. Before she could respond, a voice cut through the air. Alex. Adeline stiffened as a tall figure in a sharply cut business suit approached, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun, heels clicking sharply against the pavement. Victoria Hammond Richards' former fiancée strode toward them, an icy air surrounding her. The CFO of Lawson Enterprises, Victoria was as cold as she looked, radiating an authority that made Adeline's stomach turn. Victoria, Richard said, his voice terse. This isn't a good time. Really? Victoria's green eyes narrowed as she glanced at Emma and Lily, who were still racing around the carousel. A corporate event turned into a family reunion? How charming. Adeline stood, her posture defensive, but she didn't speak. Victoria had always been a thorn in her side, a woman who never seemed to fully understand the gravity of the situation. I know what you're up to, Alex, Victoria continued, her voice low and venomous. I've known for years. She looked down at Emma, her lips curling into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She's your daughter, isn't she? Adeline's heart stuttered in her chest, but she kept her composure. Victoria leaned in closer to Richard, her voice barely above a whisper. I saved you, Alex. 8 years ago, when you were running after a foolish girl who couldn't keep her head on straight. I forged the announcement, and I made sure you didn't fall apart. Now I want my due. Richard's face darkened, and his hand tightened into a fist. You did what? Victoria smirked, clearly enjoying the power she had over him. I know about Emma, she said with a slow, cruel smile. And I'll ruin you if I have to. $10 million, Alex. Or I'll leak the truth. I'll ruin your company, your name, everything you've worked for. Adeline took a step forward, her body trembling with rage. You're insane, Victoria, she said, her voice low and threatening. You won't touch Emma. Or any of us. Victoria's eyes gleamed with malice. We'll see, she purred, before turning on her heel and stalking off, her shadow long and sharp in the fading light. Adeline felt Richard's hand on her arm, his grip firm and reassuring. We'll deal with this, he said quietly, his voice full of resolve. No one will hurt you or Emma. But Adeline couldn't shake the unease that settled in her chest. As much as she wanted to believe Richard, she couldn't ignore the feeling that they were in far deeper than either of them realized. That night, after the chaotic events of the day, Adeline tucked Emma into bed in their cramped apartment. The sounds of the park still echoed in her mind, and she sat by the window, staring out at the city lights, her thoughts tangled in a web of confusion and dread. The apartment was small, and the bulb hanging above flickered erratically, casting long shadows on the walls. Adeline had barely locked the door when a loud crash shattered the silence. The kitchen window exploded outward, the shards of glass spraying across the floor. Emma shot up from her bed, startled by the noise. Mom, she cried, her voice full of fear. What's happening? Adeline's heart pounded in her chest. She grabbed a frying pan from the counter and held it in front of her as a shield. She moved quickly, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She could hear heavy footsteps drawing closer, deliberate and steady. Emma scrambled under her bed, clutching Mr. Paws tightly. We're hiding, right? She whispered. Adeline nodded, even though her insides were in turmoil. We're safe, baby. We're safe. Just as the figure in the gray hoodie lunged toward the drawer, Adeline swung the frying pan with all her strength, hitting him square on the arm. The man cursed and dropped a piece of paper before bolting toward the door. The window was already shattered, and he was gone in an instant. Adeline rushed to the note he had left behind, her fingers trembling as she picked it up. The words were jagged and harsh, written in red ink. The truth is deeper than blood. Minutes later, Richard arrived, his expression full of guilt. This is my fault, he said, pulling Adeline into his arms. She could feel the tremor in his touch, the fear that was still so present between them. Adeline closed her eyes, breathing in his scent. It's not your fault, she whispered, but her voice cracked with the weight of everything that had come before. "Victoria's behind this," Richard said, his voice hardening with determination. "I'll move you somewhere safe. We'll figure this out." By dawn, they were out of the apartment and into a sleek townhouse with barred windows and a state-of-the-art security system. Richard hired Ruiz, a private investigator, to look into Victoria's dealings. It didn't take long for Ruiz to uncover a tangled web of deceit. Victoria had been siphoning millions from Lawson Enterprises, using Emma as leverage against Richard to secure her silence. Adeline could hardly believe it. The threats had been real, and Victoria had been pulling the strings all along. Weeks passed, and Victoria's arrest made headlines. The CFO of Lawson Enterprises was caught in a corporate conspiracy, and Emma and Adeline finally felt like they could breathe again. With the weight of the past lifting, Adeline and Emma moved into a two-story cottage with a garden. The girls ran through the grass, chasing fireflies, their laughter ringing out in the quiet evening. And though the storm of the past had left scars, it was clear that they were healing. Richard, now a steady presence in their lives, joined them for spaghetti dinners, movie nights, and quiet moments. One evening, as the four of them sat down for dinner, Richard took Adeline's hand in his. "We're dating," he said, smiling warmly at the girls. "For real this time." Sophie, their youngest, squealed with joy. "Can we have a secret door between our rooms?" she asked, pulling out a crayon sketch. "I want to be close to my sister." Emma grinned, nudging her mom playfully. "Can we, Mom?" Adeline laughed softly, eyes misting over. "We'll see." It was moments like this, quiet, peaceful, that made everything worth it. But just as they settled into this new life, Adeline found something in the bottom of her keepsake box. It was an old photographer baby with the same crescent birthmark held by a woman Adeline didn't recognize. "Mommy, who's this?" Emma asked, pointing at the picture. Adeline's fingers trembled as she took the photo, her smile faltering. "Just an old friend," she said quickly, tucking the photo away. But she knew there were still pieces of the past waiting to be uncovered. The girls raced upstairs, their giggles echoing through the halls. The four of them embraced, a tangle of love and trust, and for now, it was enough. But that photograph, that woman from her past, lingered in Adeline's mind, a whisper of a deeper secret that had yet to be revealed.